It's billed as Britain's wedding of the year. Pippa Middleton walked down the aisle today, marrying millionaire hedge fund manager James Matthews.
From the outside, their relationship seemed perfect. Pippa and James looked like a happy couple, but things weren't as perfect as they appeared. Behind the smiles and fancy appearances, something very different was going on. While the cameras showed her looking happy, her personal life was falling apart. Now, after staying silent for years, Pippa is opening up. So what exactly has really happened? Why would someone leave a marriage that looked so strong on the outside? And why is she speaking out now? Join us as we unveil Pippa Middleton's shocking announcement about her marriage. Pippa Middleton's fairy tale. When Pippa Middleton married James Matthews in 2017, it felt like the whole world stopped to watch. The day had all the sparkle of a royal wedding, even though it wasn't one. Pippa, once called Britain's most famous bridesmaid, after she wowed the world at her sister Kate's royal wedding, was now the bride herself. Everything about the wedding looked like it came straight out of a fairy tale movie. The elegant dresses, the stunning flowers, the historic church filled with celebrities. It was a scene people wouldn't forget. And there, at the heart of it all, were two people who looked completely in love. Many believed they were seeing the perfect love story. It was magical, dreamy, almost royal. After all, Pippa was the younger sister of the future Queen of England. And James? He was a wealthy, successful businessman with charm, confidence, and quiet strength. He didn't need to show off. His calm, classy nature spoke for itself. People admired him. On paper, he was everything a woman could hope for. Pippa, too, was already a star in her own right. She wasn't just Kate's sister. She was admired for her poise, her fashion sense, and her graceful public image. People saw her as smart, confident, and effortlessly stylish. Together, Pippa and James seemed like the perfect couple. They looked like something off the cover of a glossy magazine, rich, attractive, in love, and surrounded by luxury. They bought a large house in one of London's most exclusive neighborhoods. They traveled to breathtaking places, attended glamorous parties, and appeared in endless photos. Always holding hands, always smiling, always looking happy. To the world, they seemed to be living a dream life. But dreams can sometimes be misleading. Not long after the wedding, some of their close friends began to notice little things. While Pippa's smile was bright, it didn't always reach her eyes. At events, she sometimes seemed lost in thought. She was quieter than usual, a little distant. While most people saw only the perfect pictures, those closest to her sensed that something wasn't quite right. Still, Pippa did what she felt she had to do. She kept showing up. She posed for cameras, wore beautiful outfits, stood beside her husband, and played the role of the joyful wife. She didn't complain. She didn't break down in public. She smiled because people expected her to smile. She kept everything inside because she didn't want to let anyone down. Not her family, not the public, not herself. But deep inside, she was starting to feel the pressure, being the perfect wife, the perfect sister to a future queen, the perfect public figure. It was all starting to wear her down. She was juggling too many roles, and no one really saw how heavy that burden was. Behind the fancy house and the vacations, behind the glowing photos, life wasn't always as perfect as it looked. The pictures didn't show the quiet nights at home when James was busy with work and Pippa felt alone. They didn't show the silent dinners, the conversations that didn't happen, or the dreams that slowly faded. Pippa was trying so hard to fit into a world that sometimes felt like it wasn't truly hers. It's not that James was unkind or careless. He was, by most accounts, a good man, polite, respectful, and supportive in his own way. But sometimes, love just isn't enough. Sometimes, two people grow in different directions. They stop sharing laughs. They stop dreaming together. They become like friendly strangers, living in the same home but feeling worlds apart. And because they were both in the public eye, everything was harder. They had to keep up appearances. They had to keep smiling, even when the smiles weren't real. To the outside world, it still looked like a fairy tale. But inside, Pippa was quietly beginning to realize that what seemed perfect on the surface wasn't bringing her true happiness. Her dream, once so bright and full of promise, was slowly slipping away. No one could see it, but she could feel it every day. What had started as a perfect love story had turned into something else. But is Pippa's life really a quiet story of pressure, loneliness, and a woman struggling to hold on to something that no longer feels real? Let's find out. Pippa Middleton's public life. Being the sister of the future Queen of England, Catherine Kate Middleton, is something most people can't even imagine. Kate officially became a princess, stepping into a life of royalty, fame, and endless public attention. For her younger sister, Pippa Middleton, living in Kate's shadow was both dazzling and difficult. To the outside world, Pippa seemed to have a glamorous life. She was beautiful, stylish, and always by her sister's side at important royal events. Many people saw her as part of the royal image, even though she wasn't a royal herself. But with that image came pressure. Pressure to always look perfect, smile politely, and behave like a member of the royal family. From the very beginning, the public had big expectations for Pippa. She was expected to walk, talk, and dress like someone from a fairy tale, no matter where she went, whether it was a fancy wedding or just a quick trip to the store. Cameras followed her every move, every smile she gave, every outfit she wore, and even how she stood or moved her head was studied by the media and the public. People were always watching. It was like living in a fishbowl, with no privacy and no escape. She couldn't show sadness in public or have a bad day without it turning into a headline. Even small arguments with her husband could be blown out of proportion and turned into gossip. It was exhausting to always appear happy and graceful. Meanwhile, her husband James Matthews lived a very different kind of life. He was a wealthy and successful businessman, but he was used to staying out of the spotlight. He preferred privacy and quiet over flashing cameras and news articles. The attention that came with Pippa's life was uncomfortable for him. He didn't enjoy being followed by photographers or having every detail of their relationship discussed by strangers. He wasn't just unfamiliar with that world. He didn't want to be a part of it at all. As time went on, the differences between them began to grow. Pippa felt connected to the royal world. She was proud to be part of it, proud to stand beside her sister, and she enjoyed being involved in big public events. She knew how to shine in the spotlight. After all, she once became world famous just by wearing a stunning dress to Kate's wedding. But James longed for a simpler life. He didn't want fame or attention. He just wanted peace, privacy, and a quiet life with the woman he loved. This difference in dreams and desires started to create tension between them. Pippa tried to balance both lives. She believed she could honor her royal ties and still make her husband happy. She even tried to show him the good side of public life, how it could open doors and create exciting opportunities. But James didn't see the appeal. He saw it as stressful, invasive, and not the kind of life he wanted. Over time, this mismatch became harder to ignore. They both loved each other deeply, and they wanted their marriage to work. But love alone wasn't enough to make the pressure disappear. Pippa began to feel overwhelmed by the constant expectations, and James started to resent being dragged into the public eye. The small differences they once overlooked started turning into serious problems. At first, the disagreements were minor. Should they attend certain events, or how much of their lives should be shared with the media? But those little arguments slowly grew into bigger ones. They started fighting more often. The once happy couple found themselves struggling to understand each other. Living in the public eye had taken a toll on both of them, and the truth was hard to ignore. They wanted very different things. Pippa felt loyalty to her family and the royal image she had become a part of. But James had never signed up for that life, and he couldn't pretend to enjoy it. In the end, what began as a picture-perfect romance turned into a quiet struggle. Pippa, once known as the world's most famous bridesmaid, had become a devoted wife. But that didn't make the pressure go away. Their marriage wasn't just about love anymore. It became a tug-of-war between two worlds, one full of glittering gowns and royal duties, and the other quiet, calm, and far away from the cameras. They tried their best to meet in the middle. They told themselves that love would be enough, but slowly, painfully, they began to see the truth. They were two people living in two very different worlds, and no matter how much they cared for each other, their paths were pulling them in opposite directions. It was no longer just a fairy tale. It was real life. And sometimes, even the most magical love stories face challenges that love alone can't fix. What challenges did she face? Let's take a closer look. Emotional disconnect. From the outside, Pippa Middleton and James Matthews seemed like the perfect couple. To the public, they had it all: a stunning house, exciting travels, glamorous events, and a relationship that looked strong and full of love. Whenever they appeared together at parties or charity events, they smiled, laughed, and seemed completely in sync. People admired them, even envied them. They looked like a dream team. But behind the closed doors of their home, things were very different. While the world saw joy and success, Pippa often felt a quiet kind of sadness growing inside her. James, though kind and well-meaning, was constantly busy with work. He was a successful businessman, and his career demanded long hours and endless meetings. He was always on the go, flying to different cities, attending conferences, or glued to his phone. Pippa, meanwhile, stayed at home, trying to balance her own responsibilities while feeling more and more alone. When James was home, he was usually tired and drained, and even when he was physically present, his mind was often somewhere else, thinking about work or checking emails. He didn't always notice how much Pippa was struggling. She wasn't asking for big romantic gestures. She didn't want expensive gifts or grand declarations. What she really needed was something simpler but more meaningful. Someone to talk to, someone who would truly listen. She wanted James to understand what she was going through, to share in her worries and frustrations. Living in the public eye brought enormous pressure. Every move Pippa made seemed to be watched, judged, and written about in the media. Reporters followed her, headlines analyzed her outfits, and people compared her to her sister Kate, the future queen. That constant attention was exhausting. It made her feel like she had to be perfect all the time. But underneath the polished image, she was struggling. She needed a partner who could see past the glamorous surface and support her emotionally. James didn't always see that. He assumed everything was fine because from the outside, their life looked ideal. He didn't realize that Pippa was quietly hurting, that her emotional needs weren't being met. She wasn't looking for sympathy. She just wanted someone who truly got what she was going through. Over time, the emotional gap between them started to grow. There were no huge arguments, no scandals, no dramatic moments. It wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet, subtle, a slow drifting apart. They still lived in the same house, still attended events together, still shared the same bed, but the deep conversations, the ones that bring two people closer, began to disappear. Instead of talking about how they were really feeling, they spoke about schedules, press interviews, and social commitments. The real connection, the emotional closeness that once brought them together, was fading. And as that closeness faded, so did Pippa's sense of happiness. She began to feel not just lonely, but emotionally forgotten. She could be sitting right next to James and still feel completely alone. It was the kind of loneliness that goes beyond just being by yourself. It's the kind that comes when your heart feels unheard and your struggles unseen. Pippa hadn't expected this. In the early days of their marriage, she had been so happy, so full of hope. They had been in love, sharing dreams and laughing together. But slowly, the demands of life, the differences in what they needed from each other, and the lack of real communication began to wear them down. Pippa hadn't expected this. In the early days of their marriage, she had been so happy, so full of hope. They had been in love, sharing dreams and laughing together. But slowly, the demands of life, the differences in what they needed from each other, and the lack of real communication began to wear them down. Pippa began to question everything. Now, she often felt like a shadow of that person. And that realization hit her hard. Their marriage wasn't falling apart in any obvious way, but something important was slipping away. The deep bond they once had was being replaced by silence, by distance, by a sense of living separate lives under the same roof. Pippa wasn't just losing her connection with James. She was starting to lose herself, and that's when a difficult truth began to set in. No amount of money, fame, or admiration from the public could fill the space left by the lack of emotional connection. Pippa needed more than a beautiful lifestyle. She needed someone who could truly be there for her, heart and soul. And as the distance between them grew, so did her unhappiness. The marriage that had once seemed so full of promise no longer gave her the comfort or support she needed. From the outside, everything looked perfect. But inside, Pippa was facing a heartbreaking reality, one that made her question what truly mattered in love, in life, and in herself. Who was she becoming? Where had the joyful, carefree woman gone? The one who used to laugh easily beside her sister, full of energy and light. And why is leaving her marriage? Let's explore further. Pippa's choice to leave her marriage. In the world of celebrities and public figures, many people stay in relationships just to maintain a certain image. The pressure to seem perfect, especially with everyone watching, is huge. For someone like Pippa Middleton, who was always in the public eye, there was a lot of pressure to keep up appearances. Everything about her life, from the glamorous photos to the fairy tale wedding, was carefully planned for the public. But behind all the perfection, in a small village in the British countryside, a wedding was being prepared that could almost be called royal. Pippa was quietly struggling. Even though she feared what others might say, she made a brave choice. She chose peace over pretending. Pippa wasn't just trying to meet the expectations of her family, the media, or the public. She was trying to live up to an image she once believed in. She wanted to believe in a fairy tale ending, but over time, she realized she couldn't keep pretending. The truth was, the life she was living didn't make her happy. Behind all the glamorous photos and constant smiles for the cameras, there was a woman who felt lonely, disconnected, and unfulfilled. Pippa reached a point where she had to decide what to do. It wasn't an easy choice, and it probably wouldn't make her the most popular figure in the media. But putting her mental and emotional health first, rather than trying to keep up a perfect public image, was one of the most important decisions she made. She didn't want to keep pretending to be happy while silently struggling behind closed doors. The act of pretending had taken a toll on her. She had spent years hiding her pain and trying to live up to an ideal that no longer felt right for her. In her own words, Pippa shared, "I've spent years smiling in pictures and hiding the pain, but I had to choose myself this time." Those words marked a big change in her life. Choosing yourself and putting your well-being first is never easy, especially when you feel like everyone is watching. But Pippa realized she deserved more than just a surface-level happiness. She deserved real joy, peace, and emotional fulfillment. It's easy to think that someone like Pippa, with her fame, wealth, and privileged life, would have it all. But material success and public admiration don't guarantee happiness. At the heart of her decision was the realization that peace, not perfection, was what truly mattered. She wanted a life where she could be herself, where she didn't have to pretend, where she could be emotionally supported, and where she could find the happiness she longed for. She didn't want to keep sacrificing her mental health just to maintain a false image of marital bliss. People would speculate, criticize, and question her choices. But despite all that, Pippa chose her own peace and mental health over staying in a marriage that no longer made her happy. It would have been easier to stay in the marriage and keep pretending everything was fine for the public. It would have been less painful to keep up appearances and act like everything was perfect. But Pippa understood this wouldn't solve anything. She knew staying in a relationship where she wasn't happy would only lead to more pain. And even though facing the world after making such a big decision was difficult, she knew it was the right choice. What's even more admirable is that Pippa didn't blame James. She didn't say anything bad about him or their time together. She acknowledged that James was a good man and that they shared many happy moments. But sometimes people grow apart. Sometimes two people who once seemed perfect for each other realize they are no longer a good match. Pippa understood that this is just part of life. People change, situations change, and relationships change. It doesn't mean anyone is a bad person, it just means it's time to move on. For Pippa, it was a moment of self-realization where she chose her happiness over other people's expectations. It was a choice that would help her rebuild her life based on authenticity and inner peace. And even though it wasn't an easy decision, Pippa took that step for herself and for her future. So why did Pippa Middleton wait until now to speak out? Why didn't she share her story sooner, especially when people were already intrigued by her life? Let's find out. Pippa's decision to speak out. The truth is, sometimes it takes a long time to find the strength to talk about something so personal. When you experience heartbreak, your first instinct isn't to tell everyone. It's to protect yourself, to hide, and to try to heal quietly. For Pippa, the pain of ending her marriage ran deep. It wasn't just losing a partner, it was losing a future she once believed in. She needed time to understand her feelings and rebuild herself before she could speak out. Pippa didn't want to share her story out of anger or sadness. She wanted to speak from a place of peace, not pain. That takes courage and time. She waited until she could look back clearly, ready to tell her story honestly, without bitterness. And that made her message even more powerful. But there was another reason she chose to speak now. Many women fear leaving a life that seems perfect on the outside, but feels painful inside. They worry about being judged, called ungrateful, gossiped about, or feeling like failures. Pippa understood that fear because she lived it. Now, after getting through it, she wants others to know they're not alone. She wants them to know that it's okay to leave, not because things were terrible, but because your heart deserves peace and your soul deserves happiness. In one of her most powerful statements, Pippa said, "You don't have to stay just because others think you're lucky. You deserve to be truly happy, not just look happy." These words resonated with many because at the end of the day, real happiness isn't about fancy houses or perfect pictures. It's about how you feel when no one else is watching. Pippa's decision to speak out, to be honest about her pain, takes courage. What are your thoughts on Pippa Middleton's surprising announcement regarding her marriage? Let us know your answer in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe.